All that I've really seen in this industry is a lot of hope, a lot of wishing and feelings and people thinking and giving their opinions, and that hasn't gotten us anywhere. What really needs to happen is some group needs to come together and say, hey, you know what? We're going to stand up for the American aerospace company. We're going to stand up for American business, American jobs, and American STEM education.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 244. What's the outlook for the drone industry? That's the question we explore in a 4-part series of podcasts with industry analysts, writers, and editors. In this series, I interview guests with diverse opinions and perspectives on the industry. They'll provide a range of insights on some of the industry's biggest topics and trends. By the end of the series, you should have a good sense of where the industry is going and how you can position yourself to take advantage. In this podcast, we'll hear from Patrick Egan, editor of the Americas desk at sUAS News and host and executive producer of sUAS News podcast series, Drone TV, and the small Unmanned systems business Exposition. Patrick also serves as the Director of Special Programs for the Remote Control Aerial Photography Association. He has spent the last 15 years working as a proponent for the business use of unmanned aircraft systems. Now, if you've ever read some of Patrick's news articles or posts on Twitter, where he goes by the name The Drone Dealer, you'll soon find that he has some strong opinions. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Patrick talks about the drone industry in 2019, the outlook for 2020, and he shares his thoughts on what's holding the industry back and what could be done to move it forward. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Patrick to introduce himself.
I'm Patrick Egan, and I'm the editor at the Americas desk at sUASnews.com.
Patrick, as we close 2019, what in your mind was one of the most notable stories of the year?
Well, I would say there were a few, but one of the big ones was the Remote Id Debacle, as I like to call it. You know, there was a lot of talk last year about the repeal of Section 336 and how that was going to allow for, for the FAA to bring the hobbyist into line and open the door for Remote ID, which, 336 got repealed and we did not get Remote ID. Sad story.
Is Remote ID still a viable option?
No, I don't see anything viable. They knew that going in. There's nothing that's safe and secure. The Chinese toy company has an app that they want you to install on their phone so you can see who's flying drones around you, but they're not really collecting data or don't really care what's going on. I mean, really, we're at a point now in the drone game where none of this stuff makes any sense anymore. Really, in my estimation. The story doesn't add up.
So what happened?
It was a ruse, These things they're hard. There's nobody really pushing back. Let's say no adults pushing back and saying, hey, you know what this means to the FAA? Do you know, how is this going to be a secure system? What are the infrastructure? Is it, how is it going to work? And whose drones are going to be on it? Is it going to be retroactive on all the million drones or 1.5 million drones they supposedly have registered, both, for hobby and commercial? It's so poorly thought out. I can't believe that some people still have jobs. I got to be honest with you. I don't think it would happen in the private sector.
But I thought there was a consensus on a course of action.
I just see these as roadblocks. If we backed it up into the repeal of Section 336, you'll remember that most of the advocacy groups for drones were out saying, oh, we got to repeal 336 because if we can't bring the hobbyist in the line, you guys aren't going to get your Remote ID, and then you're not going to be able to fly over people and fly beyond visual line of sight. And they were out there proselytizing. I had someone at the small unmanned aircraft systems business expo that we do every year from one of the app companies who got out there and said, the hobby's changed and we need to do something about it. We need to bring these people under control. And that's the only way we're going to fly, be over people and beyond visual line of sight. And it's not true. And I told them, I said, they cut a deal with the AMA, one. Two, it's not really the hobby people that are the problem. It's the Best Buy flyer that buys DJI drones and runs out and does whatever they want to do. There's no point of sale registration. We had a registration task force. The whole point of even having that dog and pony show that DJI went along with, and Parrot and 3DR and the Air Map and the other people, was so there would be accountability and we'd know who was flying drones, and you could, again, do all of the things you wanted to do, like fly over people and beyond visual line of sight. The beyond visual line of sight thing is a total dog and pony show. That's just not happening without, let's say, lobbyists or consultants or lawyers, and it's going to cost you $35,000 or $50,000 to start. And again, that's by and large, that's extended visual line of sight with VOs, but they changed the nomenclature. So it looked like they were making progress to the DOT and Congress. Really, it's a sad state of affairs. I just saw these two guys got fined, one for $17,000, the other for $20,000. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have been fined, but, it looks like Precision Hawk had their beyond visual line of sight waiver. The guy that was in charge of safety left the company 10 months ago. They're flying all over the country, purportedly beyond visual line of sight, flyaways, crashes, shoot downs, no VOs, all the rest of the FAA didn't even look into it. Called the managers of the FISDOs, never heard back, emailed everyone at the FAA, DOT, nothing, not a peep. So, as I always say, I'm not really looking for anything special. I just want the same treatment as like Precision Hawk got, or Boeing in situ got, or AeroVironment got, or, people with, let's say, lobbyists and advocates. So anyway, anybody who thought that and I did see on some people's blogs and other people that live part of other advocacy groups that this summer 2019, this is going to change. It's going to open up. We're going to do everything. Until you have certified aircraft and practical tests on the part of 107, I just don't see those things happening. You're just opening yourself up to a big can of worms.
You've been involved in the industry a lot longer than I have, and a lot longer than most people. And you've been writing about some of these same things for years. So I'm wondering, is what we're seeing today part of a recurring pattern?
Oh, absolutely. I call it the regulatory wheel of suffering. And it just, every, 3 to 5 years in the past, almost 20 years, they just keep resurfacing, and it's hard, and this is a new problem, and we got to deal with it. Until we overcome that, you're not going to be able to do this, and I know you want to do that, but you can't do this until that happens. And they're like kind of these impossible touchstones, and then everything slows down and people run to the FAA and what can we do to hurry this up? We know it's hard. I'm convinced at this point, man, that the advocacy groups like your AMAs and your AOVSIs and Commercial Drone Alliance, NODE and whatever, all these people do is keep their constituents quiet for the FAA. You got copious amounts of boot licking. Somebody, might get a dog biscuit thrown to them, but by and large, their job is to keep this constituency quiet.
Do you have an example of where this is happening?
My main example of that is AMA. So Section 336 got repealed, and everybody, oh my God, we got blindsided. And I think that this whole industry is starting to get woke, as it were. But people have to remember that I saw this with the AMA in 2003, 2005, 2009, 2011, 2015. They were tipped off on this last deal way before the reauthorization happened. They were actually looking for a new president of the organization. I actually even threw my hat in the ring. I go, it's crunch time right now. If you guys don't jump on this, you got people out there gunning for you. And they're supposedly all your friends, same people that were on the registration task force, your DJI, your Air Map, your 3D Robotics, your Parrots, all of the supposed friends of the RC that threw the AMA under the bus, were the same people gunning for him with the repeal of 336. The leadership over at the AMA chuckled and laughed, and we got it under control and spent millions on lobbying, and obviously they don't have it under control. When we were on the ARC in 2009, the small UAS ARC that the FAA put together, Rich Hansen was on it with me. I was on the hobby committee, which I didn't really have time for, but I went and did it anyway because I thought it was very important. And the lady that came out from the Air Traffic Organization came right out in the ARC and said, we are going to write the rules for the hobby. If you are a hobbyist and you are not on a hobby field, you are not a hobbyist. And that's it. And I turned to Rich Hansen and I said, Rich, mobilize the membership today. And, he came back. We talked about a week later, and they worked out a deal with the FAA. The other thing I'm going to have to relate to, and I've been wanting to do a story on this, a deal was cut with the FAA, and the AMA actually believed that they were going to be like the blessed CDO by the FAA. And this had been backed up by people that used to work there, that they actually had meetings at HQ and said, get ready for 1 million members. So the reason the deals were all cut, apparently or purportedly, the deals were cut because they thought they were going to get a mandated membership. And they told people we're going to have to hire and get ready for 1 million members, which never materialized. Now, I would say that the AMA, after the repeal of 336, you've seen the notice, they're not going to do their expos anymore. A lot of their membership are really pissed. And I think that group is in some real trouble.
Now that 336 is gone, they've lost their safety net and really don't have much leverage, right?
Yeah, they're pretty much done. So many of these mistakes, I'm going to call them, most of the people that are advocating for the drone thing are not public policy experts. They're not engineers. They're just folks who fell into jobs, and got these jobs and think that they're killing it. And the only thing they're really killing, in my estimation, is innovation and a wholesome hobby. And AMA has time and time again, they've been warned. The other thing is they have friends in political circles. And these people will not do anything to even help them anymore because they see the AMA as foolish and not advocating for the best interest of their members. So no one's going to bat for them anymore. Same with some of the other associations. It's really kind of sad. I don't see how the repeal of 336 is going to stop DJI's customers or the Best Buy customers from flying in places they shouldn't be. There was a culture of safety built into the hobby. You went to the hobby shop, you talked to the guy at the counter, and, he would talk you down from buying the, 90 size Warbird if you didn't know how to fly it and things like that. And really what's happened is that whole culture has kind of changed into the online thing. Most people buy something that's ready to fly. But even those people that are flying for a hobby thing, they're not the people who are really getting into trouble. It's the aerial photographers with the ready-made drones. Anybody with $1,000 can go out and buy one. Anybody who says that they didn't know there were rules for drones, that's just not plausible anymore. You'd have to be hiding in a cave in Afghanistan. You can't own a TV or internet or a smartphone, or everybody knows there's rules for drones.
In your opinion, how is innovation driving the need for regulations? Or conversely, how are regulations affecting innovation?
I was talking to someone else the other day about this, and I said before 2007, when the FAA finally started to put in an arbitrary ban on this technology, innovation in unmanned aircraft was happening monthly and weekly. That's how fast it was happening. State of the art changed in a month. And that was prior to any regulation. And people don't understand that there was a period of time prior to 2007, going all the way back, that this was unregulated. You could fly in Class B airspace. You could fly beyond visual line of sight. You could fly over people. You could do whatever you wanted. There was AC 9157, and it kind of said you shouldn't fly over 400 feet. You shouldn't fly within 3 miles of an airport, yada, yada, yada. But beyond that, I've seen paperwork with my own eyes that said you can fly in Class Bravo airspace, 14-foot wingspan, UAV, 35-foot blimp, beyond visual, whatever you want to do. This is unregulated. Have a nice day. So I'm not saying that, it can be totally unregulated, but what I am saying is at the time, the innovation in the technology and in the field was going gangbusters, and we already knew that the police could use them, and search and rescue could use them, and fire could use them, and farmers could use them, and TV and movies could use them. It was already established, already well known. People were doing it. People were making money. And so to come back now and, at this late point in the game and say, well, more regulation is not going to hurt innovation. I don't believe that. I think what's going to happen is it's not going to hurt innovation in other countries, but it's going to hurt innovation here in the United States. A lot of clamor for an American drone company, and I don't even know if you want to go down that road.
Is it even possible at this stage for an American drone company to rise up and compete?
No, because China's not playing a square game. I went to Shenzhen, not this last summer, the summer before, and, I would say it blew what's left of my hair back. I mean, these people are not horsing around. They know they're number one in drones, and they got the pedal to the metal, man, and they're going all the way. The difference between the United States and the Chinese model is the Chinese government invests in an ecosystem. So there's an ecosystem in China for drones, and they've picked a winner. They usually pick a winner, and this isn't just drones, but it's other technologies they want to be number one in. Facial recognition, AI, robotics, quantum computing. These are some of the technologies that they're working on, and some of the stuff that I've seen. And, I think a lot of people in the United States think like we're 10 years ahead of the Chinese, which is just a misnomer, because I would say there's technologies that they're interested in and they're investing in, and they're probably a few years ahead of us on. And you just got to go see it, for yourself. It's a real eye-opener. I still deal with people in government, big regulatory agencies. I'm like, have you been to China? No. Oh, you should go. It's my professional recommendation. I don't need to go to China because they're, still playing with sticks and rocks and stuff over there, which is just not true. Very, very progressive, and they're motivated. They're all about making money, and they're very motivated by that. So, let's even take some of the other Chinese manufacturers. We'll say, hey, we can't even put something out on the shelves to compete with DJI at that price point. We just can't do it. And they will tell you themselves that's because the government supports DJI. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. They support them with facilities and engineers and marketing money, whatever else. That's all fine and dandy. And as far as we know over here in the United States, they have about $75 million worth of investment. And people go, wow, DJI is kicking butt, man. But there's several factors. One of the factors is that here in the United States, and I told Earl Lawrence this at the flying car thing that NASA held in Seattle last November, said, hey, Earl wasn't really, he didn't really want to talk to me too much. I mean, he knows who I am. He's been in this, well, not in the drone sphere, but he's been around it for about the same amount of time as me. And I just told him, I said, basically what happened with that arbitrary policy clarification in February of 2007 is you installed a 10-year prohibition on a technology the Americans were probably 20 years ahead of. And I want to pause right there. So, Randy, you know when the first transatlantic flight of a, sUAS happened, an under 55-pound drone?
No.
1998.
Huh.
Okay. And it was done by Tad McGeer and Andy Von Flotto. And then Maynard, his last name is escaping me. Maynard, he was a famous AMA modeler guy. He did it also. They flew transatlantic with a model aircraft. So when you think back, because I see people, we did this and we flew over the channel with a drone. Whoop-dee stinking do, man. Happened back in 98. So what the FAA effectively did is they took that lead, they put in a prohibition, and I'm not even factoring in Moore's Law. What they basically did was shut down American innovation for 10 years. Then you had the ITAR regulation, so most people couldn't even sell the bigger systems anywhere. So basically we were hobbled. The drone hardware business in the United States was like on lockdown. And people go, what about 3DR? And 3DR was, 3DR wasn't even really a credible contender as far as I'm concerned. Too much hubris, too much somebody believing their own BS, and that's when it gets dangerous. The other thing is that I don't think they really had $145 million in cold hard cash in their hand, which, come to find out, looks like DJI has had a lot more investment. So they never really had a shot. Even Parrot, supposedly threw $300 million into drones and lost 100 million here and another 100 million there, whatever. That's nothing. And I don't know if you caught the story, but I did a story about it, and it was, did DJI bamboozle you too? And what happened was I got a line on a financial report done in India about some financing that DJI had got. So there's a company here in the United States, a drone company, and they're, they tout themselves as American Drone Company. I said, hey, I got a line on this report. It's $5,000. I'm looking for the money. The person told me that if I gave them the link, they would talk to their investors about getting the report, which was $5,000. They would get it. And if they decided it was relevant and it was something that they wanted to share with me, they would. And I said, okay, we'll have a nice day. But anyway, digging around on this deal, it appears that the DJI has somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion of investment and possibly even $1.5 billion or more of investment. And they were going to do an IPO, but the IPO was called off. And I don't know if you remember that. It was a couple of years ago. But one of the investors was the New China Life Insurance Company. And the majority owner of the New China Life Insurance Company is the PRC. And they have some supreme council. And basically it gets used like some sort of sovereign fund where they make investments in companies. I don't profess to be an expert on all of this investment and all the rest of that. And another company was this New Horizon Company, which was headed up by the son of the last Chinese premier. So, it's hard to get behind the Iron Curtain over there and look at what's going on or whatever. But there's other stuff going on.
How did we miss the boat on what was happening?
Really, if you look, there has been some changes. And the changes in the regulatory things, the people that were driving the boat originally were the DoD vendors. And they were driving the boat on this. And they thought they were going to be selling, $250,000 Raven systems to police departments and whatnot, which was crazy talk because that was never going to happen. I'm not going to say that people were like, oh, $1,500, but you could build a pretty good drone for $1,500 and you had to have some skill or whatever, but you could use them. And some police departments were using them prior to 2007. Some tried to roll them out in 2008. But anyway, so they were really driving the bus on this deal in the beginning, and they thought that they were going to get more traction than they did with the FAA. Another thing that we have to realize with the FAA, and I don't know if you've seen the integration graph that we did at sUAS News, this has been going on for almost 30 years. This is nothing new. This has been going on forever. And the policy at the FAA was, put a lid on this, it's going to go away. And it was very short-sighted. And, even in 2011, when they stood up the UAS ARC, they had a small UAS ARC, and then they stood up the UAS ARC, and it was all commercial DoD vendors. And, I tried to get on that as a small business person, and they were like, we're not going to talk about anything commercial. This is just all military. I'm like, well, what do you need a military ARC for? Because they got their own airspace and they're doing their own thing. This just doesn't make any sense. But they thought they still had their tiller on their hand on the tiller and whatever else.
You've been pretty hard on some of the people at the FAA and also on some of the advocacy groups. Why is that?
You had a lot of people that were heavy hitters over at the FAA that threw out the boat anchor on this UAS thing. Okay. And those people all turned out now to be consultants, and they're hanging out their shingle after they got out of the FAA. And you had other people that were working in the UASIO that left and went consulting. Some of the people in the new advocacy groups used to work over at the FAA, which totally cracked me up. Because even with this RID thing, I did rip on a lot of the advocacy groups publicly on Twitter. I get these calls. People are, well, why are you being so hard on us? It's like you were out here advocating, saying we're going to get to do everything after we repeal 336. That blew up in your face. You have a guy on your staff that was, chief counsel over at the FAA, and you're telling me you got caught flat-footed on this deal? You may have sensed a little frustration in my voice, but the thing is that anyone who's paying any lobbyist now or paying any advocate or a member of any advocacy group, you're a fool. I got nothing else for you. You're a fool. And there are people that are out there thinking, and there are people that are quitting these groups. Some of them are still paying certain people because these people have access to Obama cronies still and can get things done. But if you can't pay the premiums, you don't get to play. And that doesn't sound like the America that I want to live in. The America I want to live in is, we have this nation of laws and rules and small business can flourish and people can, create jobs and their STEM education and all of that. That's not where this is going. And it's a harbinger, Randy, because, a lot of people are jumping into the UAM game, the flying car thing. Are you following any of that?
Yes, and as a city planner, I'm interested in the concept and what it can offer to cities. But at the same time, I know there's some challenges.
It's total fantasy football. These guys they're crazy. So, I'm talking to people, and what I'm seeing happen with this is drone integration 2.0. That's exactly where this is going. I went to a thing in Silicon Valley here probably last year. We had Joby. We had the dude from Uber. He's got it down to 46 cents a passenger mile. Woman from the FAA, all the rest of that. And, a lot of the times they'll call me to these shows because they know that I'll come in and ask, some hardball questions. And I just said, hey, you guys are talking about certification. I've been trying to integrate drones into the NAS here for, I don't know, at least decade, whatever, we're trying to get this going. And you guys think you're going to get certification to fly people around by next year? Oh, yeah, we're going to do it. Part 135. I'm like, okay, whatever you say. That remains to be seen.
Why so skeptical?
There are some real technological hurdles that have to be overcome. And I think we're starting to see the wheels fall off the cart. With Larry's company, Kitty Hawk, there's some problems over there with battery fires and whatever else. And people are getting their deposits back, whatever else. Bell's cutting, kind of cooling on the relationship with Uber and things like that. But it surprises me how people just think these are just scaled up drones and it's all going to work with a cell phone, A long way to go on that. And I am seeing, because I do consulting, whatever else, but what I am seeing is, the drone people are drifting over to the UAM thing, and it's just as easy as anything you like taking real estate photography with a drone. And we've got a lot to do before we get there.
Isn't this an opportunity for the U.S. to lead the way?
I think what's going to happen here is we are going to lose that to China also. And we're going to lose that to China because people are talking about relatively low investments. You even see where the NASA UAM, they had to push the schedule to the right because there aren't enough people that are vendors coming into the competition. And the reason they're not is because you're going to have to invest a boatload of money, to do this. And, we just saw Mooney close their doors. I think, Sirius is primarily owned by the Chinese. What I see happening in the climate that I see happening here is I see innovation going to China, and I see it manufactured in China and them making the first. I don't even think that people understand. I mean, they do deliveries in China with drones. Drones are everywhere, ag drones, all the rest of that. I think they're probably going to beat us to the punch with the UAM too. And the reason that I say that is, one, the investment, two, they build new cities. And three, if they have a city and they don't like it or it's outdated, they'll tear it down and rebuild it. And, when you talk about putting in a new technology like, flying cars or whatever, that's handy to be able to do that. I don't think people realize, the noise, the certification, what's involved in standing up an airline, things like that. There's a lot of things, and it's not cell phone apps.
What can we do to regain the edge in innovation? Or have we lost it completely?
I'm not going to say that we couldn't gain it back. It's funny, right before I even talked to you, another big news outlet did an interview with me today, and they were like, what can we do? And I think that what we need to do is quit being patsies, okay? And I think the first thing we need to do here is, I call the DJI the Chinese toy company, and people are like, oh, that's mean, and you're deriding it, Well, that's how they were imported, man, as toys. So we got to decide, are they aircraft or are they toys, right? And if they're aircraft, they need to be imported as aircraft and they need to be registered and taxed accordingly. That's the first thing right off the bat. Anything with more than 2 propellers coming in from overseas is an aircraft. Tax, license. I think you would winnow out a lot of the riffraff also, because it would be more of a, let's say, a structured vehicle registration than me going down to Best Buy, buying it, and then deciding someday that I'm going to register it. Totally different kettle of fish. So I think we need to do that. The other thing we need to do, people have asked me, what can we do here? I say, well, maybe, if the government was ready to invest $5 billion into developing a drone ecosystem, that will be met with lots of laughter, chuckles, sighs, raised eyebrows, all the rest of that stuff. But, the Chinese invest in an ecosystem. What do you got? And then you're going to have to invest in companies. The only problem I foresee with government stepping in on that is they seem to always, I know you work for the government, but they kind of screw stuff up. Cronies get stuff. It would be hard for that not to, let's say, suffer from hiccups and whatever else.
Instead of more government in the industry, what would you rather see?
I would rather see scaled back regulation. I think that the FAA has totally overstepped their boundaries with the 5-mile buffer at the airports. Used to be 3, used to be able to call the tower. All of this worked. They've created all of this work for themselves. They've created all of this extra area that they need to enforce. They are the first ones to admit that they don't have the manpower to enforce. Yet they keep going until they are even getting the mall kiosk toys. And this is another bone of contention with me, is you're wanting to, now you, of course, person of the FAA wants to regulate mall toys, and you got people dying in 737 Maxes. It just, defies logic. The other thing we've got here, the flying car thing, whatever. This one, I just think about this stuff and I'm sitting here thinking, it's like, look, 50 years ago, we put men on the moon, return them to Earth, all the rest of that. American Aerospace did that. And now I have to grapple with the concept that we cannot, as a people, as a country, as technologically advanced as we are, integrate a 251-gram drone into the nest. And when you think about it, that's a hard one to swallow for me.
What else needs to happen?
I think that the FAA's got to get off the totalitarian, wagon that they're on. Okay. The other thing, I did a story not too long ago. I think the title was "Who Put the Whistle on the FAA's Plow?" And one of the readers did a heat map of all of the remote pilot certificate holders in the United States. And there's probably only 8 areas in the United States or 9 areas in the United States that have, let's say, like 4,000 pilots, RPC pilots in it. Okay. Rest of the country, there's a lot of counties, 1 person, 3 people, 5 people, stuff like that. So the argument that ADSB was going to swamp the system if you did it on drones, okay, that's gone. 2, that they're dangerous. There's some areas in the country that are very sparsely populated. People could sit down and mathematically calculate the risk for the area. I've got a 1-pound drone. It has a range of 10 miles. It could fly to 400 feet, whatever. You could put these systems into it. I want to, go eyeball my corn. The nearest house or people is 25 miles away. There's no air traffic over here. That sounds like a relatively safe operation to me. And I think that can be done today. So a lot of the country should be part of the UAS IPP, as far as I'm concerned. Need to decide that the people that are 107 holders are either qualified or not qualified. Manufacturers need to be able to sell to markets around the world. We need to relax ITAR. I know it's been relaxed a little bit, but we need to relax that a little bit more because the Chinese can sell to everyone. What we need to do in this country is foster a climate where small business can flourish. And not only small business. I've been talking to a lot of, let's say, Fortune 500 companies, probably even Fortune 100 companies, whatever else. And they call me up and they're like, you know what? You were right, man. You were right. Everybody laughed. Everybody said, there's not a monopoly here. There's not this regulatory problem here. There's not this effort problem there. But you were right. You called it. You were right. But you're a troll. And I get that one all the time. And what? If you don't like the picture, man, you got to send me a prettier model. That's all there is to it. All that I've really seen in this industry is a lot of hope, a lot of, wishing and feelings and people thinking and giving their opinions. And that hasn't gotten us anywhere. And what really needs to happen is some group needs to come together and say, hey, you know what? We're going to stand up for the American aerospace company. We're going to stand up for American business, American jobs, and American STEM education, because there's nobody out there doing that now. And I don't, if it sounds, nationalist or whatever, I really don't care. I care more about innovation in this country, a tax base when I'm retired, a future for our children, yada, yada, yada. And if that makes me a bad guy, man, then I'm a jerk. That's all I got on that one.
Are these patterns just going to continue, or do you see something on the horizon that could open some new possibilities?
No, I don't. I'm not seeing anything good. I think, I will say that some people got duped into the Part 135 thing, thinking, we could do the 135 thing and do drone delivery, and then we'll have something we can waiver. Again, you're going to go back to the arbitrary and capricious waiver thing. I mean, really, the waiver thing, as far as I'm concerned, somebody should write up an algorithm, basically, boop, 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 X, Y, Z, and it spits it out. How it happens now depends on whose desk it lands on, what the political climate in D.C. is, who's got, a lobbyist that can get, congressperson bag of donuts his office to call down there and rip someone a new one, stuff like that. That's never going to work. And I think that the people that got duped into the Part 135 thing are going to see that come back and bite them. Mom and pop, if you're doing real estate photography and you're doing it in visual line of sight and you're making money, God bless you, you're good. If you think you're going to actually be flying beyond visual line of sight anytime soon, you're dreaming. I just don't see that happen. And even as a fair-minded person, the FAA needs to come up with a practical test to make sure people know how to fly these things before you let them fly them over people or beyond visual line of sight. The other thing the FAA needs to do is get off the dime and establish a baseline for sense and avoid, detect and avoid, see and avoid, whatever you want it to be. This is one we've still been talking about. This has been going on since I started. And this is another bone of contention that I have, and I'm going to start working, is your manned aviation groups, like your ALPAs and your AOPAs and your HAIs, all clamored. And the reason we got shut down, clamored for, they wanted an equivalent level of safety. We need assurances of an equivalent level of safety with manned aviation. And I said at the time, I wouldn't be so quick on that, because there's going to be a day where you're going to wear that like an albatross around your neck. And that day's here. Okay? Because you know how many GA crashes, fatalities we had last year, Randy?
No.
Okay, well, I believe, this is off the top of my head. I just wrote a story, and it's off the top of my head, but 393. And that was up 13% from 2017. Do you know how many fatalities we had in the U.S. from drones in 2018? As far as I know, 0. So my question is how many fatalities do drones have to cause to be on the same or equivalent level of safety as general aviation? I'm sure even if we went back and we looked at all of the reports for damage over $500 that the FAA has collected, I'm going to venture a guess that we're still way safer than GA. And I want to know why the rules are so locked down and so draconian on drones. Why are they so stringent for American aerospace? What's the thinking on this? Why do you want to have the airspace down to blades of grass 5 miles away from airport? I'm still waiting to see the science that proves that all of this is necessary. And anytime, I talk about, science-based NASA integration is what I'm, if you want to have a new rule, let's see some science. I even talked to PK over there at NASA about UTM. And I got to tell you, I don't think they dig what I've got to say, but NASA spent $87 million on UTM. They're at TRL4, technology readiness level of 4. I went up here and witnessed the one in Reno, and they were doing simulations up there, and they had a helicopter invaded their airspace. What's going on here? I mean, the guy's not watching the news. All over the local news, national news, NOTAMs, all of it. And he flies right in there. You go, okay, well, it's a fluke, right? It's only going to happen once. They're down there in Corpus Christi. Same thing happened. Helicopter came right into their airspace. So even this UTM thing is predicated on people doing what they are supposed to do, say they're going to do, be where they said they were going to be. And I keep saying, well, this is, that's not the drone industry I know.
But I thought we were making progress on the UTM.
Nobody knows what's going on in the airspace. I've been after one of the companies that has radar to put up some radar in San Francisco so we can see what's going on in the airspace. Because I know even the aircraft and the helicopters, I teach a class on the Jeremiah O'Brien Pier 45, and the helicopters, the sightseeing helicopters come in. I don't even know if they're 100 feet over the boat, and that's not supposed to be happening. And the sightseeing seaplanes and all the rest of that stuff. Well, what I propose is that, we go to an area like San Francisco that supposedly has 4,000 remote pilot certificates, people, and see who's flying, when they're flying, where they're flying, when they're flying, how they're flying. And then we can make an educated decision on how much UTM we might need, if ADSB is going to work, if, some, Lance thing is going to work or whatever else. So after 20 years, we still have no idea who's doing what, where in the nest. And that just doesn't sound like a recipe for success for me. So what I see happening is the clamp down, then just keep turning the screws on this deal. And I do believe that things are going to get harder on people, and there's going to be more regulation, and you're going to have to wait. And I don't see some RID thing magically happening anytime soon. And again, the beyond visual line of sight, without onboard detect and avoid, sense and avoid, see and avoid, whatever the hell you want to call it, not happening. So file and fly beyond visual line of sight is still, me and Gary at sUAS used to joke about it, that we were with the Air Force, and they basically came out with their forecast and said, it's all going to be integrated in 2047, and people laughed 10 years ago, but, the next month is 2020. And it may actually take that long unless we get serious, but nobody's serious. So this kind of goes back to this being a very cyclical industry. And the thing is you get people that come into this industry and they stay for a year or 2 years. They usually bust out and they leave and new people come in. And that's another point too. I did another story. The FAA saying they've got about 150 some odd thousand remote pilot certificates out there, but they're down about 40,000. This is off the top of my head, and there is an article out there that I did. But there's about 40,000 people who didn't renew their RPC out of that 150 some odd thousand people. That to me, people are like, oh, you're being negative, and oh, there's this. Hey, all I know is that does not sound like a healthy $82 billion industry to me. If all of those people are not re-upping their license, something's wrong here. And I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. So, until we get some accountability out of the FAA, they're going to play these games. You get your new kids in there with their startups. Their pockets are full of VC money. The VC people don't have any idea what the hell's going on. And that is another, even in this late day, I talked to another company that wants to do the UAM thing, and they actually told me, we don't care about regulations, has nothing to do with us. And I said, you're an aviation company, right? Well, yeah. And I go, well, then you're going to have to deal with regulations because you're in one of the most highly regulated businesses there is. And, good thing on American aviation is when there are fatalities involved, there are no liability limits. And nobody talks about that. And that's a big stumbling block for flying cars careening into apartment buildings and all the rest of that stuff. So a lot of reality is missing from this industry. More regulation is going to come because the FAA, when in doubt, regulate. People have to remember that the AOPA are one of the groups that really hobbled the drone industry and the RC industry, that those were the people that were crying the loudest for the FAA to clamp down on unmanned aviation. So before you go joining, just realize, if a lot of this regulation that you have today was at their request.
And my final question, Patrick, with all that we talked about, what message would you like to leave to the small UAS operators who are building their business in the drone industry?
I would say that the people that do have the, let's say, visual line of sight envelope, I would just make my process better, try and deliver better. It's all about the data, and try and deliver better data sets to my customers. If you have a niche in there, I would just say, just put your head down, get working, and think about ways that you're going to be better than your competitors, deliver the better data, have a better program that's safer, have all of the insurance, be as professional as you can be, and try and color inside the lines and go ahead and make money. The other advice, I would, anybody that's got a beyond visual line of sight business plan, I would probably move the goalpost back in and see if there's a niche you can find in the visual line of sight. There's work to be done out there. It's just what is of value? What are people going to pay for? Figure that out, figure out those niches, stay there and work, because people are making money doing that. They are making money in the visual line of sight envelopes. Maybe not as much as we want, the $82 billion or whatever, but there is money to be made there. You just got to be smarter than the average bear. I wouldn't say throw the drones away just yet.
That's it for episode 244 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Patrick Egan of the sUAS News. I want to thank Patrick for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about the sUAS News or want to connect with Patrick, check out the website at suasnews.com. You can also follow Patrick on Twitter at The Drone Dealer. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate or patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.